Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Hatt. And if you will recall, I was talking a bit recently about the infinite dance. And the thing about dancing is it's much fun when you do it with others. So today I am joined by Wendy McGean, who is a fellow code model coach. And actually, Wendy, I think you and I met for the first time in Chelsea as well.
We
That
did.
3 years ago. Wendy is also an author, and she's joining me today to talk a little bit about words and evolution and all of that fun stuff. So, Wendy, maybe let's start with a little bit about you and your journey to the code model.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me today. It's always lovely to chat with you, Jennifer. Um, and I guess my journey to code model started back just after I hit a burnout in 2016. A friend of mine introduced me to WEL-Systems, and I did my original 1 week decloaking program was in Nova Scotia with Holly. And then I fast forward a couple of years, I was kind of trying to live that um, more present and more mindful. And it reached a point where I'd kind of blown up my life. I decided that my life wasn't working the way that it was, so I kind of changed everything. I used to joke that I ran away, but I really think that I was more coming back to myself, and rediscovering who I was. So probably around about 2020, I had taken an IFC coaching program and had already left my corporate job. I was kind of jobless and homeless for a while and trying to figure out what my next steps were. And contacted Louise LeBrun because I had known known who she was for having had taken decloaking once. She actually pointed me in Sheila's direction. And then that's probably around the time when I actually met you virtually. I did decloaking and then engaging and then manifesting and absolutely fell in love with the process and what I was discovering about myself and who I was becoming. So I decided to jump into that same code model coaching program that you did. And really it was a game changer for me. It set me on a path in 2016, but it took me a while to solidify that I really could choose on a daily basis who I am. That wasn't obvious to me before because I was very much ingrained in culturally conditioned patterns that I was running, and they were very strong. They're still very strong. I kind of look at life really as an evolution, and for me, it's like a spiral. And sometimes I'm flying up the spiral, sometimes a little more slowly, sometimes I backtrack and I slide down. But for me, it's about movement and even going backwards sometimes is and I don't know that it's really backward, but I think it's more maybe catching something that I missed the first time round. So it's just a wonderful way to look at the world and to learn about ourselves. Because at the end of the day, for me, I want to live my days with joy and intention and meaning. And if I can have those three things encapsulated in my day, then it's a good day.
So, tell me about your evolution to author. Were you a writer throughout your life, or
No.
was that something new that you never thought you would do?
You know what? That was a complete and utter surprise. And I realized after I quit my corporate job, I actually hopped on my Can-Am Spider and I decided to drive across Canada by myself. It was like a journey of rediscovery kind of thing. But as I was doing that, I there was all these things kind of going through my head. And what I found was that if I sat down to journal and articulate what I was thinking, it helped me figure stuff out. So I realized that late in life, and I've kept journals off and on, but it was the value of journaling really was driven home to me that 2019 period and after. And after I get back from that trip, it was such a life-changing experience. I really, for the first time in my life, especially the second leg of it, where I went from Montreal to Tofino and back, it was like living in the moment. And I thought, I gotta bottle this. How do I hold on to this? Because I'm forgetting that that's how I can live. And so I sat down to write the story. And it was for at first I was thinking about a book, but I thought probably will never happen. But then getting into coaching and doing some of the things that I was doing, it became it just kind of kept moving and took on a life of its own. And it's funny, I read recently where you went back and reread your first book, and you've inspired me to this summer to reread this book because I know that there's things buried in there that I probably haven't thought about and probably subliminally put in there that I have to go back and just reread kind of thing. But it was something that was completely unexpected. I was in corporate IT. I spent my career starting at Michelin Tires in New Glasgow, and then I moved to Montreal. I was outsourced it with to IBM at one point in time. So I mean, I spent my day writing emails and was, relatively articulate, but writing for just the sake of writing it and the enjoyment of seeing these words come together brought something new that I really did not believe would be part of my life. And now I find myself writing blog posts and that sort of thing all the time. And I find that I look at myself as a creator, and I always thought it was more like painting and that sort of thing. But we create in every moment, and words is just another way to create. And for me, I'm never far away from a notebook anymore with a pen or pencil where I'm kind of jotting things down. And it really helps me to focus and articulate what's kind of floating around in my head. It's like there's all these things floating around. And when I take that pen, it's almost like magic. I can put it down on paper and it resolves anxiety, it gets rid of stressors, it helps me clarify things, and then I can move on with my day.
Hmm. What you've described there, it's to me sounds like descent. We have our infinite energy that's coming in all of the time, and our divine selves streaming through all of the time. And, but yet with our training and, as you mentioned, culturally conditioned beliefs, there's a lot of resistance to that sometimes.
Yes.
And so, yeah, things spark off and sort of float aimlessly
Yeah.
until there's some kind of focus, which comes, as you've discovered, and I have too,
Yeah.
with a pen and paper or with words on a screen, or even just that process of energy to words, to creation. And I'm also fascinated by how you took a literal journey, a literal coast to coast
Mm.
journey, and then that became a journey of words for you.
Yes.
Whereas I kind of did it backwards. I did like I did
Mm.
an internal journey that my brain really had little clue about, but and wrote about that so that I could catch up. So interesting, kind of energy moving in different ways, but yet the
Yes.
same result. We end up with a physical tool, if you will,
Yes.
that can take us back, take us forward, take us somewhere on that spiral, right?
Absolutely. Journey is such a good word because that's what happens every time I pick up a pen. Like usually at the beginning, I have like a kernel of an idea, and I actually much prefer writing in a journal than typing on a keyboard.
Mhm.
I usually only type on a keyboard once I've got some sort of an idea of where I want to go or I want to start to capture things. But I find too, Jennifer, that I'll be out. I have the best ideas out of my morning walk, and I really have to start bringing a notebook with me because there's all these things that I want to do, and by the time I get home, I've forgotten half of the things that I came up with.
Have you done that, that classic writer angst of just about to drift off to sleep and the most beautiful phrase or idea drifts into your mind and you go, yeah, I'll put that down in the morning, and never happens.
What was it I thought last night? Yes.
Exactly. Or you do get yourself up and you end up, popping up out of bed at 2 and 3 in the morning to scribble frantically on whatever you can find because this marvelous thing has just drifted into your head with your intellect kind of at bay. The most amazing things flow, right?
Yeah, but you know what? You're better than I am. I don't think I've ever gotten myself out of bed at 2 and 3 in the morning to write something down.
Well, truth be told, I'm at the age where I'm probably getting up to go to the bathroom anyway. So at least that way you're up for a reason.
Yes.
That's fascinating, Wendy. So now you self-published, so that took you into, you were in the whole creative mode where this book just sort of organically took on a life of its own.
Yeah,
And then you were head and ears into publishing it and promoting it and distributing it and all of that
yep,
business side.
yeah.
Um, were you aware of that at the time when you were writing? And the reason why I asked this question, I feel like it's an important point to poke around with
Mhm.
because many people that I encounter who struggle with calling themselves a writer or, should I write? I feel like writing something, but I'm not sure if I'm good enough. It's because they've jumped ahead to the commercial aspect of writing, which is, you're good enough to get published, which means you're good enough.
Oh,
Rather
interesting.
than, as you discovered, writing for the joy of it, writing for the discovery, writing as a means of expression and creation, and that being enough. Um, sort of in our paradigm, the
Yeah.
external referencing versus the internal referencing.
Yeah, that's an
What was
interesting
your
question.
experience there?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I believed I would actually publish it when I started this. Because I had left my job, I had some time on my hand and it was kind of time just pre-pandemic, so I had time to start thinking about what I wanted to do. And I started to write in November of 2019. Well, we all know what happened in January and February and then in March, right? And I was writing it because I had the time. And it was a creative outlet that kept me from freaking out too much about the fact that I was kind of jobless and homeless. And as I got into that coaching program that I talked about through Coach Academy, one of the things that we did on a regular basis is that we practiced by coaching each other. So I had to come with these goals, right? And things that I was working on. So I kept coming back to this book. And honestly, as I did not think I would ever publish it at the onset because I didn't think it was going to be good enough. I did not think I could put myself out there. As a little practice, in fact, at one point, I remember putting up a Facebook page with some paintings on it because I had been painting for years and had stopped. And at that point in time, just grabbed my paints because again, I had time and started to create again. Well, just the the action of taking some pictures of those paintings and putting them up on a Facebook page and then making that Facebook page live, I was so terrified that there would be crickets that I remember launching the page, shutting my laptop and going out for a walk. I didn't want to be anywhere near the device because it was really difficult for me to share publicly something that I had created. And so I had to do things really in very little baby steps. So on Facebook, I could kind of self-publish that, right? I could choose which pictures were going to go up there and that sort of thing. And as I kind of started to get feedback and that external referencing, right? Like it can't be good enough because this is just me. Um, then I started to think, well, you know what? At one point I realized it doesn't matter what the quality is like from somebody else's perspective because that's their filter. The question was, does this speak to me? Is this meaningful to me? And once I started to embody that message, then I started to think, well, maybe I could publish this thing. And then I just kind of start looking for companies. I wanted a Canadian company, and I found one that would. So I actually went through a company in BC and signed a contract with them. And then once I did that, then the wheels were in motion, right? I couldn't not do it at that point. I think I would probably go back and change a few things. One of the reasons that I want to go back and reread it is to see, do I have something more that I want to say? And again, like just it's almost like documenting my life to an extent, right? I'm not the same person that wrote that book. I'm not the same person that went across Canada 6 years ago. But it would be interesting to see what kernels or what seeds were planted at that time that maybe I could play with now.
Hmm. So it sounds like your choice to publish or go widely public with a finished product came from that internal awareness of what if, you know.
Yeah.
rather than a have to or something that you were mapping to as you were writing. I find that fascinating, and
It
I know
really is.
in my experience that's the beauty of creation.
Yeah.
To be able to reverse that and just say, this is valuable
Yeah.
for its creation, whether or not it's shared, or whether it's shared widely or selectively.
Yeah.
Um, and I mentioned how the infinite dance is so much fun when you have people to dance with, and that's
Yes.
the beauty of our conversations, because it's a sacred and safe space to
Mhm.
share whatever, including things we create that maybe we don't want to put out publicly,
Yeah.
or we don't have to. I mean, that's the beauty of it. It's not about being a writer, is
Mhm.
not about your publishing credits. It's about your willingness to enter into that dance, with
Exactly.
yourself first and foremost, right?
Yeah. And I love that you call it an infinite dance because it really is. Like we're always changing and evolving, right? So and we can look at a piece of writing today and think, okay, that's done. And then the next day, oh, now I can do something else with that. And we can, that's the other thing. When do
Yeah.
you consider it done, right? Um,
Right.
and
And I
it,
mean, I remember in my for a while, this would have been training from my newspaper days. When you're on a daily deadline, it was definitely a one and done arena. And as a small town newspaper reporter, you are an expert in everything. I mean, one day you're writing about farms, the next day you're writing about a fire, then you're writing about heavy industry, then you're writing about healthcare. I mean, it's whatever came across your desk that day.
absolutely.
And there was no going back. You wrote it, you filed it, you moved on, because there was always a new paper to feed. And it's taking me so long to see that and feel it and unroot it, if you will.
Ah, okay.
There is value for me, and I learned in that realm how to write
Mm,
very quickly, how to
right,
process thoughts very quickly, how to kind of get to the heart of a story in 10 words or less,
right.
which can be valuable in writing, but only if I connect it to my energy and what I want to say, rather than
Yeah.
trying to map it to what other people want to read. um,
Yeah, and that's an
that
interesting
ability. And then the other thing that came up for me in that was, um, being judged, writing something down and then looking at it and going,
yeah.
and being totally discouraged by that, going, oh, I can't write that again. I for years, bit of a secret, I resisted journaling like crazy, because I didn't want to go back and
Yeah.
read things that weren't perfect. I,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, the
I wanted to
perfectionist
just move
monster.
through everything, and that was such a metaphor for my life, in terms
Yeah,
of not wanting to own my past and my history, because I just wanted to get through it and get it over with and get on to something else. So I
right.
was living in the future, to avoid having to own my past. And my words eventually brought me around to all of that, but only
Yeah,
I allowed myself to actually journal in the moment, or write things and then go back and go, you know what, there's more here.
yeah.
Um, so what was that like for you?
You know what? It's kind of fascinating. I've been journaling again off and on for years. I have a shelf full of kind of half-filled journals because I'd start one and then I would get bored with it and then I'd find a new pretty cover, so I'd start a new one. But I went back through a couple of them a month or so ago, and I found that they were almost like they were factual. It was like it wasn't now I journal what could be kind of thing. Then I was kind of recording what had happened. So they were very like not clinical. I wouldn't say clinical. So and sometimes I was pondering things, but oftentimes like there was one trip that we got in the car and we went to like Washington D.C. and then down to New Orleans. And I was like I wrote down like how much a loaf of bread cost, that sort of thing. So it was kind of historical significance in that respect because I wasn't putting myself into my journals. I was describing it like third person, like just this is what happened. Now it's more my thoughts and my, what if I did this and and things, and I'll write about things that are really ticking me off sometimes too. Like you've probably heard of Julia Cameron and her The Artist's Way. A couple of years ago, I did that 12-week program, like self-paced, that 3 pages of morning pages every morning. And I found that so incredibly liberating. And this was after I wrote the book. And it was, I found that consistently the first page and a half would be me griping about something that happened the day before or ticked off at something. And then I'd get that out of my system. And then the next page and a half would be, okay, let's look forward, Wendy. What are we going to do today? And it's kind of fascinating to go back and look at some of that stuff. For some reason, I'm not ready to turf them all out. I don't know that they really have any value other than that it's my handwriting like 30 years ago kind of thing. So I'd like to have that there. But I never really considered myself a writer, even though my part of my tagline is published author. It was very much a surprise. Oh, and there's times when I look at it, I'm thinking, did I really do that? Like, but I write now on a daily basis, just for the pleasure and again for clarification and to focus on things.
Mhm. Yeah, I hear you with the journals. I have every one I've ever written in, and once I started, I accumulated a fair pile of them. But for me, it was as you mentioned, going back to reread your book, because of course you're
Yeah,
not the same person you were when you wrote that.
yeah,
And I've noticed that in my journals. I'm going back, sometimes 10, 15 years, even before I encountered this paradigm and process for which I could understand what
yeah.
my body was doing and what I was trying to tell myself.
Mhm.
um, the genius that was captured in my words. I knew so much more that I didn't know I knew. And
Yes.
so and that to me was a sure sign of my evolution, because I'm looking back on my writing not with a critical eye, not with an editor's red pen.
Yeah,
Looking back on it with compassion
yeah.
and sheer joy and wow, I did this.
Wow. And I'm thinking about your evolution as a writer, yeah, because of your history as a newspaper columnist kind of thing. It has to be very different because it's a very different focus with the writing. So, did you find that there was a lot of a lot of rules that you had to let go or rewrite?
There have been, and I mean, a lot of the rules I embraced because it fit the life I wanted to create, which was basically a life that really had no concept or connection to divinity whatsoever.
Mhm.
I was a life of patterns,
Yeah,
and that mapped well because it pleased everybody, and gave me the safety,
yeah,
illusion of safety, of being in a very productive life.
yeah,
um, but it was my awakening that just blew that up. And in the absence, again, of a paradigm that could help me understand and process all of that,
yeah,
it became the books. And then the books eventually led me to the paradigm, I believe, because
yeah,
it was through my writing that I met Holly
yeah,
as well as Carrie Fleming, who invited me to
right.
my very first conversation. And then, we name drop a lot of the similar names because it is these very powerful women
Yes,
that have invited so many of us to continue that awakening and
yeah,
not be afraid of it, but to open to it because
yeah,
that's what we're here for. So as I was reframing my entire life and how I held myself,
yeah,
my writing was my primary means of getting there, but it
yeah,
was also something that I had to let go of because I had to literally let myself learn to write it a different way.
yeah.
From my body, from me as divine, rather than from my intellect mapped to what do you need.
Yeah, and I find I fight that sometimes even now when if I'm writing a blog post about something because now I'm there's less apprehension about putting myself out there. Not so much about my book, but I'm writing blog posts because I want to I'm offering myself as a coach, right? So there's a bit of marketing that has to go on there. And
Mhm.
that's been a huge, I've had to kind of shift the paradigm again kind of thing because it and open myself to receiving, right? Because
That's huge.
I tend to be a giver, right? I give,
Mhm.
and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But in order to be a successful coach, that at some point in time I have to receive as well. And it took you know, you talked about running patterns. Like that we at one point in time, like I that's exactly the way that I live my life. Like there's almost like boxes to check. Okay, I've done that, I'm successful. But then once that gets blown wide open, you can't go back. You can't you can't go back, right?
No.
That's when you realize that there's this big wide world of possibility out there,
Mhm.
and we start looking for what's meant for us.
Yes.
Mm.
Exactly. And it's being open to that for me that has restarted, I guess, my love of writing. I'm discovering that which you have discovered, which is the writing for the sheer joy of it. Because I was holding it as both, yeah, my means of exploration and, well, if I don't write anymore, then I won't learn anymore and I can just stay right here. Which in a moment or two feels good
Mhm.
until, but you know it doesn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey of a lot of starts and stops. I'm thinking if I was on your little spider trying to get across Canada, I would be like Fred Flintstone, you know, with my feet down, dragging and running at the same time. Um, but yeah, it's kind of the crazy things we do in the infinite dance are
Yeah,
on the our actual genius as well, and
absolutely.
that's what I love about it.
Yeah. And it's being open to the unknown, right? It's not knowing where this is going to take me, but this is what I feel called to do right now, right in this moment. And
Mhm.
it's there's days when it's easier than others. I find that as I age, sometimes sometimes I think, can you really do that? But on Wednesday, I'm hopping on my spider and I'm driving to Nova Scotia again. That's 1,500 kilometers, and I'm 61 years old. And there's times when I think, are you nuts? Like, but you know what? It's going to be awesome.
It will be.
No
It will
matter what
absolutely
happens,
be.
it's going to be awesome.
Absolutely. So again, you'll be on a physical journey east. I'll be on a journey slightly west to
Yes.
Chelsea. And then whatever we create in that room for 2 days with women exploring everything through words
Yes.
will be a journey in itself.
Yeah,
So,
that's going to be wonderful. I'm so sorry that I can't be there. It's because as soon as I saw it, I look at it, oh, the dates are not going to work.
well, you know, as my life opens,
We'll have to do it again.
I quite likely will be.
Awesome.
So yeah, again, it's just limiting beliefs. And once you let go of those, it's like, oh, well, all kinds of things are possible. And hey, I can actually have fun at the same time.
Yeah,
You know, bringing down those silos of, well, work's over here and vacation's over there. Well, what if you just did both?
exactly, exactly.
Here it is. So let's give it a try. So no, thank you, Wendy. I am so thrilled I got a chance to chat with you about this. Just to recap, your book is called what?
It's actually round trip, how I found myself on three wheels. And the painting, actually, talking about paintings, it's one of my paintings. I actually painted it and then mapped my route going and coming across Canada. So it's the painting's actually over on the floor. It has to get put up on the wall. But it's been yeah, kind of a labor of love, and I'm going to reread it because I don't know what's in it anymore.
Well, fascinating. And if people want to find it, they can find you where?
My website is wendymcgean.ca. The book you can find on Amazon. You can order it through Chapters, Indigo, like wherever books are sold. It's actually it's a printer in the US that kind of sends it out to all the different vendors, kind of thing.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And we will chat again after your great adventure in mine.
I look forward to it, Jennifer. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
this chance.
Bye now.